Did Eddie Munson really die in Dustin's arms? Like, yeah, we saw him get torn apart by the Demobats in the Upside Down, but where is his body? The gang didn't retrieve it from the Upside Down, meaning the headstone we see is empty. And of course, the Duffer Brothers gave him a hero's exit with tears and all that stuff, but nothing about his death adds up. Just think about it. What if Eddie is still alive? Eddie's final moments play out with all the emotional beats of a meaningful sacrifice. We see Dustin watch as Demobats swarm Eddie outside his upside-down trailer, their tails wrapping around his limbs as their teeth sink into his flesh. Eddie says his last words about not running away, tells Dustin he loves him, and dies. Of course he's dying, but the show never confirms what happens next. Did he really die? Just think about it. We didn't see Eddie's body itself. Yes, Dustin left the Upside Down alone, coming through the gate in Eddie's trailer, but this was without his corpse. Nobody talks about it. The gang regroups at the hospital, deals with Max's coma, and watches Hawkins tear itself apart, yet not one person mentions retrieving Eddie's remains. Mind you, we see his Uncle Wayne put up missing person posters, so clearly the body was never recovered. This isn't how Stranger Things handles every other major death. When Bob Newby died in Season 2, his body stayed in the real world, the gang mourned him, and carried that loss forward. When Billy Hargrove sacrificed himself in Season 3, Max spent an entire season processing that trauma, visiting his grave, writing letters to him. Even Barb Holland, who died in Season 1 with a very little screen time, got acknowledged. Nancy fought for justice on her behalf, and her parents got closure. Eddie gets none of this. He disappears from the story the moment he stops breathing, as if the Duffer Brothers want the audience to forget he existed. The lack of grieving becomes even more conspicuous when you consider who knew Eddie personally. Dustin spent days hiding with him, bonding over Dungeons and Dragons and sharing their fears about death. That friendship defined much of Dustin's Season 4 arc. Yet, after Eddie dies, Mike Wheeler, Lucas Sinclair, and Erica Sinclair, all members of Eddie's Hellfire Club, don't acknowledge his death at all. These kids played campaigns with Eddie every week, looked up to him as their dungeon master, but after he sacrificed himself to save them, they don't talk about him anymore. Steve Harrington fought alongside Eddie too, trusted him enough to leave him alone with the Demobats. Robin Buckley and Nancy Wheeler made their entire Vecna assault plan around Eddie's distraction. Yet, none of them grieve either. The first volume of Season 5 makes Eddie's absence more questionable. Like, come on. We see virtually every supporting character from previous seasons. Kaylee returns, Dr. Owens appears, even minor players like Murray get screen time. So where is Eddie? Why haven't they concluded his story? Eddie was really important in Season 4 and he died heroically. Now he's reduced to a tombstone with graffiti on it. Dustin visits the vandalized grave, but the show doesn't talk about Eddie's absence nearly as much as it dwells on Max's coma or Will's link to Vecna. For a character who became an instant fan favorite and whose death got us all crying, Eddie receives very little story in this new season. Let's take a look at his death for a sec. Demobat attacks are almost totally survivable. Steve got bitten multiple times in Season 4 and walked away with scars. The bats themselves aren't designed to kill quickly, they latch on, drain blood, and weaken their prey over time. Eddie's so-called death happened fast though. Maybe too fast for creatures that operate as slow killers. There's also the matter of timing. Eddie supposedly died during the exact sequence when Hopper, Joyce, and Murray killed the Demogorgons in the Russian prison. Those deaths happen simultaneously with the Demobats attacking Eddie, and when the Demogorgons die, every creature in Vecna's hive mind connected to them collapses. The Demobats swarming Eddie suddenly stopped moving, falling from the sky like puppets. It's pretty clear Eddie's attackers died before they could finish him off. Dustin finds Eddie bleeding and assumes his friend is dying from the injuries. But what if Eddie simply passed out from blood loss and shock? What if he was unconscious rather than dead when Dustin fled through the portal? Meanwhile, we know time moves differently in the Upside Down. Bodies don't decay normally, since the environment preserves everything. Barb's corpse remained intact despite being dead for days. If Eddie's body stayed in the Upside Down, could that environment keep him in some form of stasis? Could Vecna decide to preserve Eddie for his own purposes rather than let him rot? The new season avoids Eddie's death story and the characters refuse to talk about him. Trust me, none of these is accidental. We know how the Duffer Brothers play the long game, setting up payoff seasons in advance. They don't just make the audience love him and then pretend he never existed afterwards. Eddie's story feels unfinished because it probably is. That whole thing hits differently when you look at the start of the show. Stranger Things runs on Dungeons and Dragons. Every big threat is taken straight out of the game. The creators keep saying that the D&D lore points to the future of the story. So when Eddie dies in a strange way and the world moves on without a single real goodbye, the clues start lining up. His story feels paused, not ended. In D&D, a death like that is often the start of something darker. When you stack the clues from the show against the lore from the game, it leads straight to Cass the Bloody-Handed. Let me explain. In Dungeons & Dragons, Cass was Vecna's most trusted lieutenant. Vecna forged a sentient sword specifically for Cass, imbuing it with terrible power. Cass used this weapon to conquer enemies and enforce Vecna's will across multiple realms, becoming a legend for how brutal he was. The relationship between Vecna and Cass was built on mutual benefit, and for a long time, they were unstoppable together. The twist comes from Cass's eventual betrayal. The Sword of Cass, being sentient, began whispering to Cass. Over time, he grew to resent serving Vecna, seeing himself as equally powerful and worthy of being a god too. The sword fed Cass's pride until he could no longer tolerate being second to anyone. During a ritual where Vecna attempted to reach full divinity, Cass attacked him. He managed to cut off Vecna's hand and destroy his eye before Vecna retaliated, banishing Cass to a prison dimension. The betrayal left Vecna to exist as a hand and eye, while Cass transformed into a vampire. That's the story, and that could be Eddie's story too. Consider this. Eddie dies from bat attacks, bats being the animal most associated with vampires in folklore. He dies in the Upside Down, the exact dimension Vecna controls. Eddie's body is never recovered, left in that realm where Vecna could easily reshape it into whatever he wants. Meanwhile, there is that one scene from the trailer where someone is falling from the sky. Could it be Eddie? Eddie's tattoos support this theory too specifically. On his forearm, he has a clearly visible tattoo of bats. He also has a black widow spider tattooed on his chest, directly connecting him to the Mind Flayer, which takes the form of a massive spider. Billy, when possessed by the Mind Flayer in Season 3, had additional limbs from his body like a spider. So, the spider is Vecna's symbol, and Eddie carries it on him. Another of Eddie's tattoos shows a puppet master controlling marionettes with strings. This one might be the most telling of all. It represents someone being controlled, manipulated, used as a tool by a more powerful entity. Vecna operates exactly this way, puppeting victims through his psychic connection, controlling demogorgons and demobats through the hive mind. Eddie wearing a puppet master tattoo could mean that he's destined to become one of those puppets, or possibly even to control them himself if he breaks free of Vecna. The tattoo artist could have chosen any design, but this specific one? Nah. The Duffer Brothers are up to something. Then there's Eddie's final song choice, and trust me when I say it completes his Cass story. Master of Puppets by Metallica plays during his iconic guitar solo in the Upside Down. The lyrics hint at someone being controlled. Eddie plays this song, draws the demobats to himself with its sound, and then dies in that dimension. I'm sure I'm not the only one who sees the pieces falling into place. Now, some fans initially believed that Eddie's transformation would happen immediately, that he'd return as a villain in Season 5, Volume 1. That didn't happen. We see no Vampire Eddie attacking the gang in the first 4 episodes. However, the fact that we didn't see it doesn't mean it can't actually happen. Vecna has been shown to be patient, willing to wait years for his plans to come to fruition. Henry Creel spent decades in the Upside Down before making his move against Hawkins. If Eddie is being transformed, Vecna might be saving his big reveal for maximum impact, possibly in Volume 2 or the finale. The emotional side to seeing Eddie return as a corrupted version of himself, forced to fight against Dustin and the others, would be crazy. That's exactly the kind of gut punch the Duffer Brothers love cooking up. The Cass theory also provides a solution to one of the story's biggest remaining problems. How do you permanently defeat Vecna? In D&D lore, Cass is the one who came closest to actually killing Vecna, managing to destroy his physical form even if he couldn't wipe him out entirely. If Eddie becomes Cass, he could be the key to victory. The gang wouldn't beat Vecna through raw power. Eleven already tried that and barely survived. They'd beat him through betrayal, turning his own weapon against him. And let's not forget that Will gained powers too. Dustin could be the one to reach Eddie to remind him of their friendship, to play Master of Puppets, or reference their Hellfire Club campaigns in a way that breaks through Vecna's control on him. Max broke free of Vecna's control in Season 4 through music. Eddie could do the same, except instead of just escaping, he'd turn on his master with all the strength of a vampire lieutenant. The Sword of Cass doesn't need to be a literal sword. It could be Eddie's guitar or his knowledge of Vecna's weaknesses gained through his death. This could be one of Stranger Things' biggest twists, making Eddie's death and resurrection the linchpin of Vecna's ultimate defeat. Whether he comes back as a villain or an ally, the Cass theory gives the story a direction that feels too right to overlook. The Duffer Brothers don't drop D&D clues for flair. They don't mark a main character with bats, spiders, and puppet master symbols without a payoff. Eddie's setup fits the show's mythology so well that his return feels like the next logical move in something they started the moment he arrived in Hawkins. Season 5. Volume 1 might not put him on screen, but the story keeps his presence alive. Characters mention him. Scenes sneak in, some visual reminders. None of these moments feels random. They all read like signals, each one pointing to the same idea. Let's face it, Eddie's story didn't end in that trailer, it just paused. Waiting for the moment the show finally reveals what he has become. The most obvious reference comes through Dustin's visit to Eddie's grave. The scene is brief, showing Eddie's tombstone vandalized with spray-painted accusations like burn in hell, freak, and murderer. Hawkins still blames Eddie for the deaths that Vecna caused, still sees him as a leader of a satanic cult rather than the hero who sacrificed everything. Dustin himself carries Eddie's memory more overtly than anyone else. In several scenes throughout Volume 1, Dustin makes decisions or says things that directly call back to Eddie's influence. He was even dressed like Eddie and is actually wearing one of his rings. When planning their moves, Dustin references D&D terms and approaches that he learned from playing in Eddie's Hellfire Club campaigns. Most significantly, we also see Robin use one of Eddie's catchphrases, "Bad news first, always." Eddie said this in Season 4 when delivering information to the group, making it his personal philosophy for handling difficult truths. Anyway, Mike, Lucas, and Erica, the other Hellfire Club members, don't explicitly mention Eddie in Volume 1, which remains bizarre given their connection to him. They played D&D with Eddie every week for years. They saw him as their dungeon master, defended him when the town turned against him, and helped hide him from the mob. Yet none of them referenced him when discussing their current situation. In my opinion, the only explanation is that the Duffer Brothers are saving most Eddie-related emotional beats for later episodes. Possibly because they would involve Eddie himself appearing, rather than just being remembered. The show also continues using D&D as a framing device in ways that connect to Eddie's role. Will Byers, who has taken over as the group's de facto dungeon master after Eddie's death, runs campaigns that mirror their real-life situation. In Season 5, Volume 1, the gang references needing to roll a 20 to defeat Vecna. If you don't know, this crazy roll is nearly impossible. Eddie's campaigns back in Season 4 established this same concept with him telling the Hellfire Club they needed extraordinary luck and skill to survive impossible encounters. That language persisting into Season 5 keeps Eddie's name present even when he's not physically in scenes. There's also Flight of Icarus, the prequel novel about Eddie's life published after Season 4. The book wasn't released to give fans closure about a dead character. Nah, it was released to build Eddie as a franchise figure, expanding his backstory and making him feel more important to the Stranger Things universe. Flight of Icarus positions Eddie as someone with unfinished business, someone whose story goes way beyond the season where he appeared. This supports the hints that Eddie isn't as gone as Volume 1 wants audiences to believe. Netflix and the Duffer Brothers have been notoriously secretive about Season 5's production, refusing to confirm or deny which actors are involved beyond the main cast. That secrecy around Eddie's potential involvement makes sense if his return is meant to be a major surprise. Quinn himself has been cagey when asked about Eddie's fate. In interviews, he gives answers that neither confirm Eddie's death as permanent nor hint at his return. He talks about Eddie in present tense sometimes, references loving the character, says things like who knows what could happen. Clearly, actors under NDA cannot reveal plot details, but they also can't lie outright to the press and fans. Quinn doesn't want to give out spoilers. Volume 2 and the finale still have hours of story left to tell. If Eddie returns as Case, or as anything at all, the hints are already there. The tattoos, the D&D mythology, the Kaz theory, the continued references, they all point toward Eddie Munson's story having at least one more chapter. Whether that chapter ends in tragedy or redemption, we'll find out soon.